I'm very happy to be here. I used to live in Zurich for 5.5 years. But before you start judging my Swiss Deutsch at the happy hour, the furthest I got were my conversations with the cashiers, checkout cashiers at Migros and Coop. Haben Sie die Supercard? Ja. Brauchen Sie eine Tasche? Nein. Brauchen Sie eine Quittung? Nein. And then something about Merkli, stickers. And then I'm like, no, nice stickers. And then I would say, danke, tschüss, and just leave. So thanks again, Media, for having me. I'm very happy to be here and to share my story with you. About 2.5 years ago, I was having a now or never moment. You know, like the kind of now or never moment where maybe you're looking at yourself in the mirror, you've gained a little weight, and you're like, oh my gosh, I should really finally go on that diet, now or never. Or maybe you're turning 40 next week, and you've always wanted to go skydiving. That's a now or never moment. Or even closer, you have a crush here in Media. Every time you go to the coffee machine, you're like, I want to ask that person out. That's an now or never moment. I was having a now or never moment in a building not too far away from here, and we were discussing the call to action for a campaign. And it was like, start now, enter to win. Start now, enter to win. And I'm just sitting there and I'm thinking, okay, I was a digital marketing director for one of the largest private education companies, and I had been working there for 9 years. And I could see myself either staying there for like 5, 10, 15 years, or really listening to my instincts and really taking that now or never plunge. So I think, okay, girl, are you crazy? You're leaving Switzerland, right? Like gorgeous mountains, picturesque 6-minute bike rides to work. It took me 6 minutes. April Spritzen evenings at the Bodies to go back to Ukraine, a country that's recently been put back on the radar thanks to HBO's miniseries Chernobyl. Also our president, who used to be a comedian, so I might say he's still a comedian, and also a country that's been at war for the last 5 years. And it was also a country that I hadn't lived in the last 17 years. So I'm thinking, I have a really nice rooftop apartment, I enjoy my job, and I'm also getting a comfortable salary. Moving back to Ukraine to move in with my parents and become officially unemployed. So I think I must have blacked out for a minute or two, but I took that now or never plunge and I left. I wanted to see what I was made of, respond to Brené Brown's call, vulnerability. Who knows Brené Brown? Yes, I see some people. If you don't know her, please Google her. She's amazing. And so I arrive in Kiev, and I'm thinking, okay, what's next? I need to get myself really plugged in. I find the best restaurants, the best bars, the best everything, try. And I also find a Facebook group called Kiev Expats. The way I introduce myself is, back in Ukraine after 17 years, looking for a voice coach. Really random, I never actually took up voice lessons, but I did get contacted by this San Francisco blogger who was writing a piece on reverse immigration. What is reverse immigration? Since the fall of the Soviet Union, little history lesson, 1991, my country has shrunk by 18%. That is a little over 9 million people that have been leaving the country for better opportunities. I was one of them. So when a person returns, it's kind of a strange phenomenon. I know we have some Ukrainians in the room, so you know. It's strange, right, if somebody returns. And so I wasn't doing anything spectacular with my time. I quit my job. And I decided to say yes to getting interviewed by this blogger. We meet, and he changes my life. No, we didn't fall in love. That's not what happened. But he ended up introducing me to somebody that was the person I started my NGO. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself again, because before that, I decided to respond to another now or never moment. This time, I really didn't think about it. I go on a sailing or a yacht trip with a friend of mine with another 250 people. I fall madly in love with somebody. This never happens, but this time it did. And I end up going to Texas, This is my representation of Texas. Lots of meat, cowboy shoes, all that stuff. And with a little detour to Atlanta. Atlanta is where I attend a conference that ends up being very powerful to me. Because there I was listening to a speaker called Catherine Hoke, and she had started an entrepreneurship program called Defy for prisons in America. And it's not that I've never been to different conferences or inspirational speakers, hadn't heard them, but whether it was a combination of all the different podcasts I had been listening to since I quit my job, books I had been reading, whatever it was, but I ended up writing out a Defy pledge. Ooh, yeah. This Defy pledge basically said, I signed this August 1st, and it said, by May 1st, I'm going to open a foundation for women, and there will be at least 10 women. Now, why was this so important to me, right? Why women empowerment? Well, because for the last 10 years, I had been thinking about starting something and wanting to do something. I had volunteered in South Africa and worked with vulnerable women, would research different stats on human trafficking. I would tune into different documentaries. But it was all of this, okay, you've thought about it, but you've never done anything about it. And so right then and there, I said, I'm going to do something. So I come back to Kiev, and this isn't working. Here we go. Come back to Kiev, and I meet with my friend, my only friend, because I had just moved back, right? So I meet with her. Her name is Ilyana, and I tell her, and I say, guess what? I have this idea/plan, blah, blah, blah. And she looks at me straight in the eye, and she's like, me too. I also want to do something with that. She had been thinking about starting something on her own for about 3 years. So we decided to come together, and an idea for an NGO is born. There is no name, no specific niche, and not a whole lot of money. But we wanted to do this. So how do we approach this? We do a deep dive needs assessment, and we contact everybody, meet people from United Nations, UN Women, UNHCR. We visit different hotline centers for human trafficking, go to parliament hearings, and do a lot of research, basically. And there were 3 statistics that really stood out to us. Number 1, 27% of all management positions in Ukraine were applied by only women for senior positions. This was last year in 2018. Number 2, only 12% of all government positions are women. And number 3, 2.2 million people have been displaced since the war in Ukraine 5 years ago. We're now in the 6th year. 70% of them are women and children. Now, some people don't know who internally displaced people are. I've had a few conversations today. These are basically internal refugees, people that have been displaced because of a situation, a trauma, a war in their own country. And the most baffling statistic here, right, 70% of them, is that women, we know that women are affected by this the most. Many of them have become widows. A lot of them have to start their jobs over again, and they definitely don't have a sense of community. Even in Ukraine, they're seen as the other. So we take this a little step further. We start thinking, okay, what are the stereotypes of Ukrainian women? I'm not going to do any call-outs now, but each one of you has a stereotype in your head about Ukrainian women. Well, these are just a few of them. These are the ones that kept on coming out. All Ukrainian women chase rich foreigners. Number 2, women are just housewives who are good cooks and cleaners. And number 3, they're beautiful. Now, some of these might be true, some of them are not, but it is true that when you have certain stereotypes, you start taking these different habits and internalizing them yourself, right? They change a culture, they change habits, and they definitely change the leadership setup in a country. Even myself, growing up, I would have teachers tell me, well, you're a girl, you'll be fine, you just have to marry successfully, you'll be fine. So we started taking all of this information, and my friend and I said, what are the main things here in common? We saw that it was employment and financial sustainability. And so, lo and behold, Second Wind is born. This is also something for you to know. I researched that in April of this year, the most viewed YouTube video was how to make the perfect brows. Just another thing on appearance, right? So this NGO called Second Wind was born. Who are we? We are a coaching and development center for women that believes that change is possible when women are given the right resources, knowledge, and community support. We work mainly with internally displaced women, young professionals, and women. And we have tackled it specifically looking at 3 different areas. This is fast. Okay, so workshops, seminars, and mentorship. When we talk about workshops, we see that some of these are funny, right? So the first one is why money matters and you don't need a sugar daddy. I kid you not, this is definitely a cultural thing that I have experienced. And so what we're doing is we're talking to women on really how to empower them to become financially sustainable. How can they do different courses so that they feel empowered, whether it's vocational skills or basically community support. So those are one thing. We're also doing seminars. Now this is something that I'm very excited about because this is called Express Women Entrepreneurship. So we'll be having 20 IDPs, internally displaced women, where we'll be training them on entrepreneurship, how to start a business, and getting them so that they feel like they can start their own jobs. We're doing this in Kiev to begin with, but we're also going to take this further in different cities where people can't afford to come to Kiev. And the third one is mentorship. Now, I know that all of you here, looking at you guys in your eyes, and know that every one of us has gotten somewhere because of the help of somebody else, right? Whether it's a professor, a mentor, a manager, somebody who's impacted your life. And we truly believe that mentorship is really important, and we want to be that second wind for other women. So that is a third thing that we are doing. So, yes, and I can tell you now that we have had 300 people that have attended or been interested in our workshop. So we're very excited about that. We really see that there's a need, and it keeps on growing. So my digital playbook, right? How and what does marketing have to do with all of this? Well, when I started this NGO, I was thinking, okay, girl, you got this. You are the digital marketing director for a really big company in Switzerland. Of course you'll be fine. Well, what I figured and what I realized that marketing for a company that more or less has its shit together compared to you're starting something new is not the same thing. Marketing automation, AI, and customized dynamic landing pages, programmatic, not in our vocabulary. So we are now going back to the basics. And what do basics look like when you are starting your own company? Well, number one, beauty and the brand, I like to call it. Why second wind? This was honestly a hard one for us because when you're starting a company and you need a name, you want to like that name. You want other people to like it. You don't want to be bored with the name in 3 months, right, for it to die on. And so both her and I come up with 30 different names collectively. We come together, we hate them all, and then we go back to the drawing table and say, you know what, just take some time off, you'll be fine. We come back together and we decide at a bar, because that's where all good ideas take place, at bars. So we decide on the name Second Wind. Whether it was a combination of the fact that I was training for a half marathon or the fact that there was the atmosphere, but we said second wind. What does second wind mean? According to Cambridge English Dictionary, it means a new energy or strength to continue something that is an effort. 2.2 million people that have been displaced have to start something that is an effort. Refugees that are kicked out of their countries have to do something which is an effort. And everyone knows that they need a second wind. So, the name is one thing, now the logo is a whole other beast. I'd like to say that we had an amazing logo to start out with, But the truth is, I got invited to a conference on Ukraine's innovative future. And I needed to start handing out business cards. So that's what everyone does in Ukraine. So I ended up putting this thing together. For all the designers in the room, I'm very sorry. This is what you do when you start something. Second thing is, when we started opening a Facebook page, I put this beautiful thing together. Once again, sorry to all the designers. And then the third one is when we finally sent our brief to a freelance designer, and we had this, our final logo. And something that I learned about your logo and your brand is that when you are building something, not everyone is going to like it. And you're going to get a ton of opinions from different people. You know, is it feminine enough? Is the D large enough? Do you feel a connection? And so what I want to say is that if you're starting something in your brand, you need to like it. You need to feel a sense of pride on it and put it on presentations like I'm doing now. What makes them click or what makes them tick? So I just read somewhere in Cannes Lions Media that data was the most annoying word, or the second most annoying word. But I would like to say and share with you that data has been actually something very important for us. I'm going to give you a little overview of Ukraine's social media demographics. So we have 13 million Facebook users. 59% of them are women. They're actually one of the top female users in the world. Our most popular age bracket is 25 to 35. And Ukraine is number 3 according to quarter gross, only surpassed by the Philippines and by India. So when you look at a typical user, you have a user in 30 days will comment once. They will like something 9 times. And when it comes to advertising, they will click on an advertisement 13 times versus 8 times for the typical user. All that to say is that when we started putting our events together, we started looking how many events are there in Ukraine compared to Zurich. Just to give you a little demographic. So we know that Switzerland is roughly, or Ukraine is roughly twice the size of Zurich. Kiev is twice the size of Zurich. 1.4 million versus 2.9. So when I started researching causes events, I would see on a given day, Zurich had 8, and Kiev had all of 96 events. So whether it's the boom that's happened since the Revolution of Dignity 5 years ago, we've had a boom in creativity and innovation. Whether it's, I think just also more democracy, but for us to stand out was not easy. And so our very first event was called, we were debunking the stereotypes of women in Ukraine, and it was called How to Be Authentic in a World of Shoulds and Musts. And honestly, we just wanted to see if anybody would show up, and whether our marketing was shit. And I remember saying, okay, 5 people, that's great. Even if 1 person shows up, wonderful. We had 89 people that showed interest and 26 people that actually registered and came. And so here again was my pledge that I'd made to myself in August, and I was very proud to see that there is actually a need and an effort, and this wasn't just that we were trusting the process as we were going. The other thing that we learned when we were doing A/B tests is that politics do impact your business. I think this is a very important one because, a lot of times you can put that aside, but when we were looking at Ukrainian versus Russian, we had 26% more engagement when writing Ukrainian. And even when people would come to our workshops, we would speak with them in Russian, but the ad and the copy of the ad really makes a difference. And don't want to be perfect. So people have mentioned this today in different presentations, but I think it's really important just to go with it, right? Being vulnerable is being creative. And we would see, maybe you can see that, only 55% more engagement when we don't show our faces. I don't know what that has to say, because we were looking at other different ads. Don't really want to debunk this, analyze this a lot, but the point here is that when you're starting out or when you're doing something, I encourage you to go ahead and continue testing that, because perfect is so relative for everyone. Back to Brené Brown, my favorite. To be creative is to be vulnerable. Really let that sit in and use that, apply that in your life. Researching what other people are doing. So I think it's really important that when you're in a new country or when you're doing marketing for a different country, really do explore their competitors. See what, this is what we were seeing, all kinds of ads like this. And so we were seeing that a company or an NGO that's just started out was having 80% engagement similar to what they were putting out there. Nurture your base. Honestly, this was really important to me because we are only 6 months young, our NGO. We have not a lot of followers on Facebook, but something that's been really something that's helped me kind of stay together is the quote by another lovely person, Gary Vee. He says, "Don't pander to the numbers, bring value, and don't fake it till you make it." And so for us, our base, if we can't bring our base something that's important, a value, then we don't have an NGO. We see all these different people that are starting out their businesses every day, and they're dead in 3 months. Second Wind can be dead in 3 months if we pander to the numbers. But if we're connected to our base, then we are able to see what is important going forward. And we look at it, we don't have customer journeys and life cycles quite yet, but what I like to look at it is relationships 101. Ask questions, listen, and follow up. So what does that look like in the digital world? Ask questions through surveys and polls. We're able to receive a lot of information about the women that we're working with, about what their interests are, and what kind of topics are important to them. What they're sharing online, they're there, we know that. And also by not just posting and leaving. I think we're all about, numbers, engagement, but if you really pay attention to what they're saying, you really figure out what your base is telling you, and you're able to push that brand forward. And the fourth one is not so very digital, my digital playbook, but I think it's very important. It's word of mouth and PR. I remember when we were just starting out, and I would get questions, "So what do you do?" And I know we all love this question anyway. What do we do, even if we have a great job and a great title? And for me, I would be too embarrassed or just not very sure of what we were doing yet until one time I was at an event and somebody asked me, "So what do you do?" And I said, boldly and smartly, "I co-founded an NGO for women in Ukraine. We're a coaching and development center, and we're helping internally displaced women in Ukraine, giving them better lives." And right there, I was like, the power of your words, the power of speaking something into reality, how important is that? And because of this, we've been able to make some really good connections. One of them is Princess Angelika Jarosławska-Sapija. If you're from Poland, I didn't know that you had royalty in Poland, but this woman is actually somebody who's a big supporter of Ukraine, and she believes and she's pushing for the solidarity of Ukraine to stop the war and to help people. She knows of our NGO and wants to help us because of the value of saying and speaking, putting that into words. We were invited to a press conference to talk about gender, politics, and demographics. She was there along with my business partner. That's one example. We met our, oopsie, I'm very sorry. We also met our first professor who will be teaching on financial sustainability and micro-financing at a brunch for UN women. We met our lawyer, who's not on here, very lawyer style, and he was able to register our NGO in a month versus 5 months compared to most NGOs. So I really believe in the power of speaking your dreams into reality and seeing where they take them. Now, I'm not telling you all of this so that you can just quit your job and trust it, take that now or never leap. But I am asking and I'm encouraging you to trust your process. Whether it's taking a step back and letting somebody step in. We're all scared of what that will bring us if we let somebody else step up. Or maybe it's being more creative in your design process. That's being more vulnerable. Or maybe it could be anything, maybe it is starting something yourself. But I really ask you and I encourage you that whatever it is, I hope that you really lean into it and really take it forward. So thank you so much for listening to me.